Hello and welcome to the CX Files for 14th September 2023. My name is Mark Hillary and I'm in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
And I'm Peter Ryan, back from my visit to Asia, literally just off the plane from Tokyo, and delighted to be with you today, Mark, where we are introducing what I think promises to be a very exciting discussion with a longtime friend of the CX Files, one Mr. Jon Yarlett.
Well, Jon has been working with us for a long time, and I've certainly contributed many articles to his journal, and he's definitely been a force for good in the industry and someone who's consistently been supporting what's going on. So what did you talk about?
Well, exactly. You reference the journal that Jon has been the publisher of now for several years, the Intelligent Sourcing publication, which was originally a print magazine and is now 100% digital. And I would add one of the premier publications when it comes to anything in regards to the BPO and the IT services space. But Jon has actually taken on a new challenge of late, and he is the founder of the Impact Sourcing Alliance. Now, Jon will be the first one to tell you that impact sourcing for him is very important. It's something that he has gotten to know as a business model intricately over the years. He has seen it work firsthand in many different parts of the world. And I thought it would be a nice opportunity to catch up with him to talk a little bit about what the goals of the Impact Sourcing Alliance are, what the plans will be in the near to medium to long term, and really get his vision about where impact sourcing is going, not just from destinations that might be seen as far off or in the immediate offshore, but certainly as well what can be done from the perspective of work being done close to home from an impact sourcing angle.
Yeah, I mean, there's opportunities close to home to Jon himself, but we've also had guests on the podcast recently talking about opportunities in the United States, and you can just see that this is not just about trying to create jobs in a developing country. You can certainly find many groups of people that are not being served with high quality professional jobs all over the world in every developed economy as well. So, if you are a budget, if you are a budget holder and you're responsible for finding a partner organization, then obviously you're going to be comparing them on price. You're going to be comparing quality, capability to deliver the service. But once you've sort of convinced yourself that 3 or 4 potential partners can fulfill what you require, then certainly adding impact sourcing into the mix can make the difference.
It can make a huge difference. And something that Jon was really good about during the course of our chat was he exercised a ghost that we've been hearing a lot over the years. Mark, you've heard it, I've heard it. And that's that impact sourcing is corporate charity. You're bringing in people from disadvantaged backgrounds to perform a service, but it's probably not going to be as good as if you use a traditional model. Jon was abundantly clear in our discussion that in many cases, if not the majority of cases, individuals that are performing different business process tasks or functions are going to do so to a level of excellence that's equal, if not superior, to what you would get with a traditional model. And I think it's important to bring that to the mix, because something again that has become very, very evident is that a lot of organizations are prioritizing outsourcing partners that will bring in at least some aspect of the impact sourcing element to the service delivery.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't we go straight to the interview with Jon Yarlett and hear about his recent work on impact sourcing?
Sounds good. Well, the CX Files has been on pause for the month of August, but we're coming back with a bang with one of our favorite longtime supporters of the pod, and somebody who's been doing a lot of amazing work when it comes to promoting the outsourcing industry in general. But Jon Yarlett has taken on a new role that we're going to hear a little bit more about over the course of our discussion today. First of all, Jon, welcome back to the CX Files. Always good to have you in for a chat.
Thanks for having me, Peter. Pleasure to see you.
Well, it's a pleasure to see you always, and I'll look forward to seeing you sooner rather than later, I'm hoping, at least at some of the upcoming different outsourcing events happening around the world. But today we've got a bit of a global topic in itself, Jon. And as our listenership knows, we generally will speak to you in your capacity as the publisher of Intelligent Sourcing. But today we're speaking to you in a different role, in a different job that you've taken on in the last few months, and that is the CEO and founder of the Impact Sourcing Alliance. So I think it's a good point of reference for everybody to start. Could you maybe just talk a little bit about what the Alliance is and how it came about?
Yeah, so the alliance came about probably at the beginning of this year. And I just felt with all the speak and all the talk going on around impact sourcing, I just felt there needed to be almost a central point where we could provide information, start conversations, educate people that needed to be educated, and really shine a light on what impact sourcing actually is, the benefits and the merit of it, and really push the agenda up into on both the buy side and the sell side, really. Up into the boardroom and really let people know the benefits that can be obtained from the business model.
Now, that's really important. And I will say that there's a lot of chatter going around LinkedIn right now. There's a lot of chatter in the industry about impact sourcing. You've touched on a couple of these points, exactly the benefits it can bring, both from a social standpoint. More and more, we're talking about the commercial benefits. But as a good point of starting for a discussion, Jon, and I realize that's actually the second time I've said that in the last 2 minutes. But maybe as a point of reference, could you just define in 2 or 3 sentences what impact sourcing is so we're all playing on the same field?
Absolutely. Before I do that, I think it's important that people are aware that whilst you and I are talking about impact sourcing, because that's a common term that you and I are familiar with, a lot of people will know this as either rural sourcing or inclusive hiring or part of a company's CSR or ESG policy. Really what we're talking about is inclusive hiring. And the way that I would, I guess, summarize it and describe it is providing opportunity for all marginalized communities on a global level. I think that a lot of people will link the term impact sourcing specifically to unemployed youth in South Africa. But what we're trying to stress is that whilst that is a big part of impact sourcing, we are talking about all marginalised communities, from those that are single parents to army leavers to disabled people to people that need a second chance in life. And while I'm saying this, I just want to be clear that what we're not talking about is any kind of charitable initiative or doing things for the sake of doing things. It's a proven business model that many, many vendors are adopting at the moment and are finding great success.
And I'm glad to hear you say that, because I do think that there has been a perception in the industry and different industry stakeholders over the course of the past several years that the entire basis of impact sourcing was or is charity. And that's definitely not the case. No. So what I was hoping, Jon, you might be able to do would be to talk a little bit about some best case examples or some initiatives you've seen that have highlighted impact sourcing that's been able to provide a net benefit from the social angle, but also that's been able to provide commercial benefit to both the outsourcing operators as well as the clients that have decided to take this model on.
Yeah, I think that in terms of commercial benefit, what we're seeing, regardless of the type of impact sourcing you do, is that things like loyalty within an organization is much better. So that leads on to much better attrition and retention figures. There's, I believe, a global war on talent, and I believe that there's a number of pockets within the employment pool, if you like, that are not yet being really, really looked at. And there's individuals there with some great talent and some great skills that are often overlooked. So a couple of cases in point, and some of these guys are already working with us. So we have organizations out there like Tent, who their purpose really is to work specifically with refugees. and get them into employment, get them trained into employment. And that's something that a lot of household names and a lot of on both the buy side and the sell side have pledged to tend to take 1, 2, 3,000 refugees over a period of time. Highly skilled people, people hungry to work, got the skills that need to work, and are being overlooked. I've got clients in the US that are doing a lot of work with incarcerated women. Women that are either about to or have recently left incarceration, that are looking to turn their life around, looking for an opportunity, again, skilled, again, hungry to work, and are a pool of labour that's not really been looked at because it's obviously not on the top of anybody's list when they're looking at recruiting. I saw an article today, actually, funnily enough, on LinkedIn, from a company in the UK, a company called Iceland Foods, who are doing a similar initiative in the UK where they're going into prisons, looking at what opportunities they can give to people with a second chance. I was very fortunate enough to be in South Africa a couple of years ago and saw the work that Shadow Careers are doing. Franco and his team, they've just hit a massive milestone, 700 graduates, if you like, 700 people that have graduated their program now into employment. The one that I've heard recently that I absolutely love is a company called Newson, who have this amazing model called One Agent, One Child. And essentially for every agent you place with them, they will put a child through education, through paid for education. And getting them at a young age, so not waiting until they're maybe at teenage level when you know it's harder to educate, but getting them at what we would say at primary school level in the UK, and just really giving back. And I believe that's important because my own view is that if you are a company and you're a vendor, or you're an enterprise and you're going into a region and you're setting up, whether it be a call center or a shared service center or whatever it may be, and you're recruiting from that region, then a good percentage of your workforce by right should come from inclusive hiring. I believe it's a responsibility.
This is really practical, Jon, because I think what you've done here is you've been able to put some real life concrete examples to the concept of impact sourcing. And to my mind, that's so important because we've all heard nebulous theories about how a particular business model can work, again, in theory. But when you actually formulate a plan and implement it, and you see that there are both benefits from the standpoint of impacting the individuals who've been brought in from perhaps a marginalized community. As you mentioned, and I think this is very important, the extent to which loyalty can be driven, especially in a community that has taken on these roles, but also the fact, as you said, there's a crisis in terms of being able to manage recruitment, in terms of being able to bring in good people to work in outsourcing, because the labor pools in the developing world as well as the developed world are just so tight right now. Effectively, what we're doing is, from the perspective of the outsourcer and their clients, we're opening up a whole new pool of talent that otherwise wouldn't have even been thought of perhaps 10, 15 years ago.
Absolutely. And let's be clear as well. In this instance, we are, you know, on the front line, you're giving the opportunity to the worker, right? You know, they've come from a difficult background, whether it be a marginalized community or whether they're coming from, you know, a troublesome past and they just need a second chance. But the beauty of impact sourcing is that you're primarily giving that person a job, but secondary to that, you are affecting their family, you're affecting the community they're in, all in positive ways. You know, as an industry piece, and you'll know this, we get bashed for job losses, taking jobs offshore, automating everything, you know, putting people out of jobs. When the reality is, I believe that in terms of job creation, I think as an industry, you'd be hard pushed to find another industry that can stand up against the sourcing sector. I really do.
Yeah.
Um, and it's one of these things where I'm very passionate about it. I mean, I've been very, very fortunate to share the stage when speaking about this with some amazing people, people like Zondra Mandela, people like Tracy Freeman, people like yourself, people, organizations like the International Association of Outsourcing Professionals, who champion everything, chaps like John Browning, who have the Global Mentorship Initiative. There's so much going on. And we feel that with so much going on, often a lot of this good work can get lost in the wash, right? So what we want to do is bring all of that together, really highlight and champion those organizations that are doing amazing things for our industry. And equally be able to say to people, if they're coming to us or directly or indirectly and saying, well, look, this, I've heard of impact sourcing, but what is it? Or can I have more details? Then we're in a position to say, well, look what this company are doing, or speak to this guy and really look at it. It's not something you necessarily have to jump into and take all of a sudden, hundreds of seats somewhere. You can start off with a small group and see how it goes. I mean, just taking a step back to kind of real life case studies. I've got a client in South Africa. They're a contact center, and they've got a whole team of deaf people working. Now, when you kind of put those two things together, you kind of think, well, how does this work? Like how how in modern day can this actually happen? But you've got the guys there obviously doing a lot of the non-voice stuff, but above and beyond that, they've been given an opportunity. They would have struggled to find work, and now they are employed and working, and making a go of it.
That's a great example, John. And one of the things I always like to talk to people about is the effect that impact sourcing can have as a broader multiplier, just perhaps even beyond the individual that goes to work in an outsourcing operation. And I think at CX Outsourcers earlier this year, we had a wonderful example of this when Nathan Muniz from 24/7 Secretary talked about how they had implemented an impact sourcing strategy in a small city in the Philippines. And within the scope of a couple of years, the neighborhood had cleaned up, the crime had gone down, people's homes had improved, other businesses looked like they'd improved. And it was just the fact that they'd been able to hire a few dozen individuals from within this community who were getting a good wage, who were getting a regular steady paycheck, and what that can do in terms of just improving overall living conditions.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're absolutely right, Peter. We're obviously talking about getting people back into work and back into employment, but the knock-on effect of that and giving people, the training that they need, giving people the financial advice that they need, giving people, the social skills that they need. I mean, the facts as well are that the skills that individuals, regardless of the background that they've come from, the skills that a lot of people learn within the BPO contact center environment are real kind of skills that they can take anywhere with them in life. The difference here is that because of the background a lot of these guys have come from, they're not just being taught about, how to budget themselves, how to have more training, even things like basic hygiene. A lot of these organizations are talking about as well. So they're really from the ground up giving them all the skills and all the tools that they need to move forward in life.
Okay, so John, one of the things that you have touched on over the course of our chat today has been a number of examples from countries like South Africa or India. Can you talk about the applicability of impact sourcing in countries that we might consider more on the developed side? You're in the United Kingdom in Essex, which is a wonderful part of that country. I'm living in Montreal. We're very fortunate to live in the countries and the cities that we do live in, but there are hardships in just right down the street. You can point to people who are perhaps down on their luck. What can impact sourcing do in modern developed economies in order to alleviate poverty as well as help raise community standards?
Absolutely, and it's a really really great question, Peter, because as I said at the top, a lot of people associate impact sourcing with, let's say, lesser developed countries, but an example would be almost so in places like the UK where you have quite coastal rural areas, that may be in the Highlands and Islands of Scotland or on the coast of Ireland and places like that. It's difficult for people to get into work. It really is. There's not a hell of a lot going on in a lot of these places. So one of the things that companies like Ascensos do is they build things like hubs, Ascensos hubs or Ascensos locals that enable people living in kind of a smaller community not to have to travel into a big city to an office, but they can go to a hub and work out of that hub. And the difference there between that and work from home is that you're with other people, you're communicating with other people, you're sharing experiences, you've got people to lean on, you've got support. And it's another way of using that model, using the non-mainstream model, for want of a better phrase, to get good quality staffing. You've also got companies that do a lot of work from home. Now that sorts people that maybe are disabled and can't get into the office. And, it's interesting as well. One of the big things I'm seeing as well, certainly on the R&D and the technology side is a big kind of area of recruiting people with autism, because people with autism may struggle to kind of be in the office, be in social situations, be around people. But in terms of task-driven activity, kind of very complicated activity, they're able to perform at a very, very high standard. And there's a big trend now that I see of employers seeking out certain segments that they feel can do certain tasks, if not the same, maybe even slightly better than other people they may have in place.
Great stuff. Okay, Jon, just to finish off, why don't you tell us a little bit about what the plans for the Impact Sourcing Alliance are going to be for the rest of this year going into 2024, and maybe some ideas about if somebody wanted to get involved or join the Alliance, what can they do?
So the plan for this year, we've got a big month coming up for September. September, we will be launching our third special report on impact sourcing, with some great content in there from some of our editorial partners, including Harambe and Everest Group and Shadow Careers, IAOP as well. And we're also going to be launching the website, hard launch of the website and the LinkedIn page, and that will all be happening in tandem in September. And then moving forward for the rest of the year, it will be really trying to get as much information out there as possible, really trying to again, I know I keep saying it, but shine a light, educate people. We will always be looking for any of your listeners that have got any kind of opinion pieces or thought leadership articles or case studies that would like to push them out. We're happy to do that as well. And then into next year, we will just be seeing where we go. We'd love to do some form of event around impact sourcing. We'd love to kind of get some great minds together. It's interesting. Yeah, I've come on here as the founder and CEO of the Impact Sourcing Alliance, but strategically and cleverly, what I've done is surrounded myself with people that are far more experienced and have far more knowledge in this topic than I do. So I want to just put a shout out there to a few people that have very kindly given their time to support me during this. Namely, we've got Tracy Freeman. Now, many people will know Tracy as almost the face of Bethesda. And if they've worked with South Africa at all, they would know Tracy. Not many people know, though, that Tracy was actually the country lead for impact sourcing and digital jobs for Africa many years ago. She was the Rockefeller Foundation representative. And her knowledge and experience and passion have been integral to helping this develop. Debbie Hamill, who's the CEO of the IAOP, is a massive champion for all types of impact sourcing, and dedicates a lot of the session time at her events to talking about it, and has introduced me to people like John Browning and Sarah Emright, and people like Chitra at the Avasant Foundation, and some really, really great people. And then Rita Soni, who is the principal analyst of impact sourcing and sustainability research at Everest Group, who again is very, very passionate about what we're doing. And, Everest produce a lot of content as well, and we'll be working with them. And then the partners as well. So going through all the way from Televerde to Shadow Careers to a number of the others that are going to be joining us. I want to thank everyone for really helping this get up and running. This is very much a passion project, and I just want as many people involved as possible to help push this great initiative.
Well, Jon, we can tell it's something you really feel strongly about, and congratulations on bringing the alliance to fruition. As far as I'm concerned, there's not a downside to what you're doing, and I recognize a lot of the names that you just mentioned. A lot of the companies are very familiar, and they're wonderful organizations. They're wonderful people. So keep doing what you're doing. We'll be watching with great anticipation for the Impact Sourcing Alliance and its activities over the course of 2023 going into 2024. And we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. We really appreciate your feedback and suggestions. You can reach myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan via LinkedIn. Please also leave a rating or review on your favourite podcast provider, as that helps more people to find us. As always, we'd like to thank Chris Haig at Traction Media for the CX Files graphics. See you next week.